I want to take you through a timeline of Susana's murder. What we know about the timeline is that around 7 p.m. she left for Kelly's house. Right? How do we know that? Well, her mother, Maria, when she took the stand and said she left, she said 6 o'clock. That was what she said. But the phone records very clearly. She said, I called her about 10 or 15 minutes later after she left to make sure she had gotten to Esmeralda's house. Right? And we all know she didn't go to Esmeralda's house. She went to Kelly's house. But she called her 10 or 15 minutes later. Well, that's at 7:17 p.m. Mom called her at 7:17. You heard that evidence, right? You got to see Investigator Wilbanks map out for you that exact call as it came in at 7:17 p.m. And what it showed very clearly is that she's not at Kelly's house at that time. She's not over at Alyssa's house. She's in the area here of Singleton Road, where Investigator Wilbanks told you would be consistent with her walking down Singleton Road to go to the apartment complex. Right? That's at 7:17 p.m. From 7:28 to 9:58 p.m., we know that based on her Life 360, she is at the apartment complex. And she's with Kelly. And she's with Alyssa. And they're hanging out. They told you she was there with us. Right? Nobody's got exact times. Nobody was putting their stopwatch on. I started my stopwatch when I started talking just so I know how long I'm talking, but nobody does that in real life. They gave you an estimate of how long they thought they hung out, right? Around 10 o'clock she went home, right? 9:30 to 10, I think is what they said, is what Kelly said. 9:30 to 10 o'clock, somewhere in that time frame. I walked her to the end of the neighborhood, and that's when she went home, right? And that's consistent with her Life 360. That shows her there. We have, at this point, 9:58 to 10:07. It shows this trip of her walking home, right? And it's at 9:58 to 10:07. What is, and we'll get to it here in a minute, but what is really interesting is, as Investigator Wilbanks talked to you about, this is based on cellular networks, it's based on when your phone picks it up, when it doesn't pick it up, but it shows several different points on here that are relevant, including that she's on Singleton Road, and then she is on Santa Ana Drive, which is where she lives. She is steps away from her home. She is steps away from being home. You saw this. I'm just going to turn the sound on the laptop real quick. But you saw that. Next, what we know is that sometime during that period of time, she disappears. How do we know that? How do we know she disappeared? There's not a single phone call. There's not a single text message. There's not a single social media post, not a comment, not a message to any friends, not reaching out to anyone ever again. The last visible or physical or electronic trace of Susana's life is as she's walking past King David County. That's it. After that, there is virtually no trace of her ever until she's found in the woods. It shows that she made it back to Santa Ana Drive. She is literally, Kelly and Alyssa told you, the end of that night, they had a great night. There were no problems. There were no issues. She was walking home. She wanted to go home. They were all going to bed. There was no discussion of her going anywhere else. There was no discussion of her doing anything else other than going home. And in a particularly tender moment, they said, we thought we were going to see her the next day. We thought that we were going to hang out the next day. She made it all the way back to her road before something happened to her. Before she immediately changes directions and ends up back in the defendant's own apartment complex. Alyssa and Kelly told you, they didn't see her the rest of the night. The Detective Carter told you, she knows no one else in the apartment complex. She has no other connections in that apartment complex. There is absolutely no reason that she would voluntarily go back to that apartment complex. There's no prior messages. There are no prior phone calls. There are no prior social media messages. The lifeblood of a teenage girl in communicating with friends and people who she knows. There's nothing ever in her lifetime connecting her to that apartment other than Alyssa and Kelly. But yet, and here's what's interesting. This trip is a 9-minute trip. 9:58 to 10:07. There's an impossibility for her to get from Santa Ana Drive back to here in that period of time without a car. You saw her walking all the way to Santa Ana. We know she walked to Santa Ana Drive. We know she passed the King David Academy because she's walking. But then almost in an instantaneous moment, she is back in Windstate Village Lane Apartments, the Sterling Glen Apartments where the defendant lives, where he not testified, but said to the detectives in the interview he would post up all the time. He'd sit there in his truck and he'd monitor what's going on at the exits and in the parking lots. But he sits there. And she gets back there. It's impossible walking. Plus, there's no other camera footage. You heard, they reviewed all the camera footage. She didn't walk back past King David Academy. She didn't voluntarily walk back to the apartment complex. But she ends up there. At 10:20, Ms. Briggs said, what happened between 10:21 and 10:29? We absolutely know. I absolutely know. Because we have the images of exactly what happened. She is traveling at 40 miles an hour down Singleton and Steve Reynolds Boulevard before there is a crash alert at the Oak Lock Trace neighborhood. That's exactly what happened. Her phone is traveling at 40 miles an hour. And you don't have to have any specialized training or knowledge to understand the human being can't walk or run that fast. She is in a moving vehicle. You heard testimony from Detective Carter, who has significant experience and understanding of Life 360. You don't get a crash alert by dropping your phone. Everybody told you that. We've dropped our phone. Nobody's ever gotten a crash alert. You don't get a crash alert by braking hard. There were no accidents that time.
Objection, Your Honor. I believe that is misstating the evidence. You can get a crash alert from hard brake. Detective Carter testified to that.
Mayor. So what the testimony, the text message says it could be from any of those things. What the testimony, and I don't make up evidence, the testimony from the witnesses is that nobody has ever gotten a crash alert from hard braking.
That's my recollection.
But they also introduced the message itself, which says this could be from hard braking.
Yes.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
The photograph here, and what's interesting about this, Detective Carter testified and told you that what appears to happen up here is a U-turn on Steve Reynolds Boulevard. I'm going to take you to the testimony of Synovia. She said, I saw the defendant coming back this way on Steve Reynolds Boulevard, and then he turned right here. And that's where she confronted him, right, about the vehicle. That's wholly consistent with him turning around, U-turning on Steve Reynolds Boulevard and coming back. But in any event, at that moment, Susana's phone is thrown from the vehicle. There are no accidents. There are no, she didn't drop it, it doesn't happen. Detective Carter told you of significant importance. The only way you can get a crash alert is that your vehicle has to be traveling more than 25 miles an hour for at least 30 seconds. That's the rules from Life 360. I didn't make them up, they did. And that's what she testified to. So, if there are no accidents and there are no other incidents, her phone is thrown from the vehicle. How else do we know that? You're going to see here in a minute, phone records. Her phone never moved again. It stayed there, despite her body ending up 22 miles away. 16-year-old girl voluntarily throwing her phone out of the window because she doesn't want it, and then ending up dead? That doesn't make any sense. What makes sense is the defendant throwing her phone out of the vehicle. And how do we know that makes sense? Because Ms. Drake didn't mention it one time in her closing. That's what she doesn't want you to know. She doesn't want you to think about No possible version of events that she is attempting to get you to believe can account for the defendant throwing Susana Morales' phone out of the window. It makes no sense. Why would he throw it out? Why would? It's murder. He doesn't want to be tracked. Those phones can be tracked, and we did. We tracked them, but her phone never moved. It stayed there through 76 missed calls from her mother and her sister and her friends and her boyfriend. And it rang, and it rang, and it rang. You heard another red herring in this case, another distraction tool, was that Mr. Drake questioned witnesses about the battery being dead. Right? There's no way that that could be where the phone remained because the battery's dead at 10:30. Well, you heard numerous expert witnesses testify to you that phone did not die at 10:30 p.m. It died after 6 a.m. And how did we know that? Because her phone records show call after call after call, logging and pinging off the same tower in the same sector, never moving again after 10:29 p.m. We do know that her phone was thrown at that time at 10:29. The crash alert that was received shows Susana at that location at 10:29 p.m. and her phone is never found again. It's never recovered. This is that area at Oak Block Trace where that occurred. What's the next thing that happens? Right? There's not much else that happens that we have documented other than the defendant sending his mother text messages at 11:58 p.m. It's me. Mom told you she never saw him that night. No explanation as to why he sent that text message. I understand. We have a text message. That's the only other text message. That's the only other documented activity. Investigator Willis told you, I went through all his phone records. And for that period of time, now there were other phone records that showed him moving, if you recall the maps, showed him moving a little after midnight from Norcross up to Interstate 85, to Highway 316, past the airport in Lawrenceville, all the way driving out to Tequila, Georgia, 22 miles away from his house. At 12:52 a.m., it shows the defendant in the woods exactly where Susana's body is located. By 12:52, he is in the woods in Tequila, Georgia, where his gun is recovered and Susana's body is found. We know he was there at least 6 minutes later because he's still pinging off the same tower at the same time, or 6 minutes later. Right? You'll recall his changing stories with Detective Carter. He initially said, I never went down to 316. I drove around the Norcross area. I didn't go down past Lawrenceville and Highway 316. And then they confronted him with his records. Oh, this does look bad. I did go down Highway 316. That's what he said. I did go down Highway 316. Yeah, I did drive down that way. And yeah, okay, so maybe my phone was around that area. But I just drove. I just drive everywhere. Right? And then it's, well, you're there for an extended period of time. It's not just 6 minutes. You're in the exact same area. We're at 1:39 in the morning. So he's been there at this point for 47 minutes in the woods with Susana's body and with his gun. That's not it. That shows you right there. And you heard Detective Poppy goes, well, that's not it, right? That can't be, you can't just have been sitting there because we had Detective Carter testify and tell you how long were those calls that he was out on. There was only one of them lasted, it was less than 10 minutes. The other ones weren't even answered. So we got 47 minutes, he's on the phone with Zenobia for less than 10. In one of these 4 calls, right there, where her body's at. 1:46. We're now 7 minutes later. 1:46 in the morning, he's still there. We're almost an hour of him there in Tequila, Georgia, with her body, his gun, in the woods. Again, there at 1:46 a.m. And then the next morning, Detective Carter told you she didn't ask him about this because she didn't have these records yet in the interview. He went back. He went back. Mr. Drake told you. He lied completely about the gun. He lied about the gun. He lied about dropping the gun in the woods. And he lied about, he went back. She told you that just a moment ago, that he went back. I didn't need her to tell you that, because we already told you that. He went back at 9:35. And you don't have to doubt why he went back. She told you why he went back. She told you he went into the woods. So despite his repeated statements to the police that he had never gone in the woods, that he was never out of his truck, that he only saw parked on the side of Highway 316, that he had nothing to do with this, complete fabrication. It's an absolute lie. Sergeant Jorstad said it best. That's a bold-faced lie. Everything you're saying is a bold-faced lie in that interview. Shows you here the next morning, back out there at 9:35. Well, what's significant about that? We'll talk to you about that in a moment. But I want to talk about Susana Morales. I want to talk about who she was. What you heard testimony of. Happy. Life of the party. Comic to her friends. 16-year-old girl. In the prime of her life. She's just getting started. No connection to the defendant. Alyssa Marvin told you that as they were walking out of the apartment complex, the defendant offered them a ride, which they declined. She also told you that she, Alyssa, talked to the defendant at the pool and Susana was there. That's it. She is present 2 times when the defendant shows up. That does not show a relationship. It does not show any communication between the two of them. It doesn't even show that she knew him, ever spoke to him, or talked to him, ever. In fact, Detective Carter went through her phone records, through the defendant's phone records, through the defendant's cell phones, through both of their social media accounts, not one single communication in history between the two of them. Ever. Ever. She didn't know him. He was a stranger. She had never interacted with him. There is no evidence, period, that she had ever interacted. In fact, there is evidence to the contrary. There's no communication. Somebody you interact with, somebody you're friends with, somebody you know you're talking to on the phone or through text messages or for probably most teenagers, social media. 0. She didn't know him. She had never spoken to him. There's no evidence of her ever even speaking to him. She is walking home from her friend's house. That's what you heard. Kelly and Alyssa told you everything was normal with her that night. And yes, she smoked marijuana. And according to the defense, apparently that's somehow justification for murder. That she's smoking marijuana, so she must be a troubled teenage girl. Right? Straight to consider herself like most teenagers who smoke marijuana. That's all that happened that night with her. There's no evidence of her using anything else, of her taking anything else, of anything else ever other happening to her whatsoever in life. Her friends hoped to see her the next day, but when she left, despite communicating and talking and texting with her best friends on the planet, she never sent another message, ever. Not, hey, I'm going to go over here, or I'm going with this person, or this, or that, or anything. There are none on any platform, anywhere. And even if we thought, well, maybe somebody deleted them, they're on her phone records. There's no outgoing messages. There are no outgoing phone calls. She never called another person. She never texted another person or communicated with another human being other than the defendant that night. All of her friends said she would not get into the truck with someone she didn't know. The defendant. She did not know him. He is a stranger. He is what goes bump in the night. He is the one who uses his badge to prey upon innocent girls, which is what he did that night. She didn't know him, and everyone testified there's absolutely she's never gotten into the vehicle with anybody she didn't know. She's never done it. She would never do this. The people who know her best in life, her best friends, and she, as Morel testified, I told you, Rose, No. Alyssa, Kelly, she would not do this. She was in a happy relationship with Axel. He told you. I loved her, and I think she loved me back. They had been going out for a couple of months. Her friend told you she's not that kind of girl. She had no evidence that she would ever go just hook up with somebody else, somebody random, particularly somebody she did not know, that she had never spoken to and never communicated with in her entire life. But yet somehow she ends up completely naked in the woods a few hours later. She was going home. Their theory of something else happening makes absolutely no sense and isn't supported by a single shred of evidence. Not one thing that they can point to say, this is what she did. This is where she went. There's nothing. She was going home. The evidence that you heard in